Folks, how is everyone doing? This is College Football Focus. We are back. Believe it or not, the football season is just around the corner. And to that end, we are going to begin today with what I hope to be a talk about all of the conferences in college football, not just the power leagues, the group of six leagues as well. And today, we are going to dive headfirst into the ACC. But before we get to any of that, please, for those of you watching on YouTube, hit that like and subscribe button. And for those of you just kind of listening, well, don't do that. Just kind of keep listening. But we are going to get into the ACC today. And with us, we have the always entertaining Tyler Nohe from Always Talkin' Ball. He and Lance have a great podcast over there. So I heartily recommend that you listen to them. But Tyler, how are you doing today?
Good, Mike. How's it going?
Oh, it is going just fine. If we can just kind of get past this weather, get to July, then it really starts feeling like college football. But we're seeing the preview magazines coming out. A lot of people are starting to talk about it. So there's a little bit of a buzz. It's not quite just around the corner, but it's getting there. Each day gets us a little bit closer to doing that. So I guess let's just kind of go into this first. What do you think is just like an overarching storyline for the ACC this year? They had a couple of teams in the playoff last season with Clemson and SMU, and I know that there seems to be a little more depth at the top. But what's just kind of like an overarching thought you have about the ACC as it heads into 2025?
Yeah, I think it's two teams is probably that magic number for them. That's obviously with all the CFP talk going on in the offseason, talks of the Big 12 and the ACC getting two guaranteed bids. They got two teams in last year. Like, I think if they can get another two teams in this year, I think that'll be a success for them. Whether or not that'll happen, I don't know. Obviously, start at the top. Clemson is kind of back to what most people project them to be, is like, the Clemson of old, like, the dominant Clemson teams with the third-year quarterback. The wide receivers are there. The defense looks good. Like, they've got guys who are on mock draft boards for 2026. So they've got all the talent across the board, like guys like Carson Beck transferring in from the SEC to the ACC. Bill Belichick coming into the ACC to coach the Tar Heels. There's all kinds of storylines. Can Florida State bounce back from their just abysmal 2-10 season last year? Can SMU duplicate their success? So there's everywhere you look in the ACC, I think there's some storylines.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Certainly that Belichick one, that was a little bit when he first took the job. It was a head scratcher in that you thought, okay, it's not going to work in college, but then you go back and look at the lineage with his dad and all that stuff. So it kind of made some sense. But then just some of the missteps that have happened um, with the off-field drama, you wonder if it's going to implode before it ever really gets a chance to start. But yeah, some of the things you mentioned, Clemson, Florida State, Miami maybe taking that next step. Is SMU a fad? So we will see. We're going to just kind of go through each team and just maybe highlight a few things that maybe we can expect. And I guess let's just start with Bill O'Brien's Boston College. Year one, probably about what should have been expected. They were inconsistent off and on. I know that the offense had its moments. Down the stretch, though, it was just abysmal. It couldn't score. Lost down the stretch. Did get to 7 wins for the second straight season, so it was probably a success. But if you talk to Bill, it probably wasn't what he wanted. And now they have their quarterback, Thomas Castellanos, transferred out. So there are some questions at quarterback. That is my biggest concern with Boston College. I think there are some pieces on defense, although they did lose Donovan Ezuraku to the NFL. But I think there are some pieces there they can build with. But for me, at Boston College, it all starts with the quarterback play.
Yeah, I think it'll be an interesting battle between, obviously, returner Grayson James, who took over for Castellanos when he decided to dip out, mid-season last year. Played pretty well, but they've got a transfer coming in from Alabama, Dylan Lonergan. And, one thing we know about Bill O'Brien is that he is a good offensive coordinator. He coaches quarterbacks really well. He wasn't necessarily like, the best head coach and GM in the NFL, but give him the reins and kind of like East Coast guy. Like I think at Boston College he'll succeed. But I heard the guys over at Walk On Talk this week. I mean, is Boston College, one of the toughest jobs in America? Like it's just Northeast. You don't hear of a lot of Boston College fans. And if there's guys in their neck of the woods that are good, like, are they just going to go to schools like Penn State, right? Or are they going to get poached by, Notre Dame? Notre Dame loves to recruit that area. So it's a tough job, but I think Bill O'Brien is probably the best man for it.
Yeah, he is. He certainly has roots in the area. His family lives there. That was the big thing when he left Ohio State. He got hired and he was gone almost before he arrived. And people were wondering, why would you go to Boston College? Well, he's got roots there from his time with the Patriots and his family lives there. So in hindsight, it made sense. And you're right. It is. I was just in Boston last weekend, and it is a pro sports town through and through. Bruins, Red Sox, certainly Patriots and Celtics. So sometimes college sports takes a little bit of a backseat, but I will say if they do win, people will get behind them. But I think it's one of these, you got to show me the results first. So I think it'll be an interesting year. You're right, that quarterback competition, however that goes, whether it's Grayson James or whether Dylan Lonergan comes in and is the quarterback that Alabama thought he was going to be, and BC thinks he can be, then maybe they can pull off some surprises. Moving on to Cal, been a little bit of a tumultuous offseason for Justin Wilcox. He one morning looks in and sees all his running backs. Then the next day, none of them are there. They all left. I mean, Jaden Ott goes to Oklahoma. Javian Thomas leaves. Even some of the young guys who probably would have been in line for a lot more carries decided to go. I think it was 5 total that they ended up losing. So that is a team that was on the precipice of maybe turning a corner, but maybe a little bit of that has been stunted with all of those defections. I do like some of the guys on their defense. Cal Uwalave is a stud at linebacker. They've got some pieces in the secondary, but I think that the defense is going to have to carry the freight for this offense because early on, I think they're really going to be just trying to find some footing before they can really get going.
Yeah, secondary, they got Jaden Mickey to transfer over from Notre Dame. So that'll, be a bolster to them. But you're right. It seemed like Justin Wilcox was building a lot of momentum there in the Pac-12. He was a really, really good at, they were really good at home. And obviously you saw that last year when Miami came to town and, we saw the Calgorithm, get going. Game day was there. That was a fantastic game. But they had a guy playing in that game at quarterback, Fernando Mendoza, who was no longer there. He's at IU, and he's another guy who's kind of shooting up boards. Like he's got the typical 6'5", 230 laser rocket arm, and they replace him with Devin Brown, possibly from Ohio State, which you're familiar with. Or, they might go with the new guy, the freshman who, decommitted from Oregon. I'm not even going to try to pronounce his name. I'm just going to call him JKS. But he was a 5-star guy and Oregon thought highly enough to recruit him, but he decommitted and went to Cal. So I think you're right though. Like it's becoming a tougher job by the minute there for Justin Wilcox. He's a great coach. I mean, no doubt about it. He's a great coach, but them joining the ACC, and then having to make, 3-4 cross-country treks. Like, again, being there in Berkeley where, again, it's kind of like Boston College. Like, there's just not a lot of football fans there in Berkeley. I mean, when they get going, sure. Like, game day was great atmosphere. But, they're not just – that's not their focus, like an actual, like, college football town. So, I hope Justin Wilcox can continue to, improve there and turn it around. I'd like to see what he could do with, like, another program. But – we'll see what Cal does this year.
Yeah, I just think they're going to have to win the way that he knows, old fashioned, hard hitting, get some turnover, short field stuff like that. So it'll be interesting to see if they can do that. Moving on to Clemson, I think most folks are in agreement that this is the team to beat in the ACC. They have the most returning production in all of college football. They have stability at quarterback. We've seen what has happened before with Clemson when they've had a multi-year guy under center. They have a receiver core that can rival Ohio State's as far as their starters. The offensive line, most of the pieces are back. And the defense, I mean, where do you start? TJ Parker, Peter Woods, Sammy Brown, AV. I mean, they've just got a host of guys who are going to be in the NFL in the next year or two that are going to make their presence felt. Obviously, the defense didn't get the job done last year, which is why Dabo tapped Tom Allen to come in and do what he could do, because Penn State was a top 10 defense even before it got Jim Knowles in the offseason. And Tom Allen has had some pretty sound principles. And I really think that's the only thing that could stop Clemson from being a runaway freight train if the defense doesn't improve off of last year, especially against the run. They were really easy to run against, and that's not something you're used to seeing from Clemson.
Yeah, it was really interesting. Dabo doesn't normally, go off the cuff and go. He sticks with his guys, right? For him to go outside the program and get Tom Allen to come in, that was big for him. Dabo's taken a lot of criticism over the last couple of years for not utilizing the portal the way that most people think he should. And this is his year to shove it all in their faces. Like, right. I mean, they've got LSU coming in week 1. They've got South Carolina at the end of the year. They've got the ACC schedule. Like you said, Cade Klubnik, third year in Garrett Riley's system. Bryant Wesco Jr. and Antonio Williams on the outside. They've got all the pieces, and they're coming off an ACC championship too. So, I mean, I think, the defense, not much to say about the defense. They're going to be solid, but this is his chance to get back to those, late 20 teens years where they were going toe to toe with programs like Alabama. And so I think, you just kind of know Dabo's personality. Like, he's keeping some receipts in the back of his mind.
Yeah.
Like he knows everybody who sets him, especially Tyler from Spartanburg. So he knows people have been talking, and all those players know it too. It's kind of bulletin board material for them. So right now, it's definitely playoff or bust for Clemson this year.
Yeah, and what have we seen the last couple of years? The last 2 national champions, Michigan, Ohio State, returned a ton of guys, had veterans at quarterback. Will Howard wasn't a veteran at Ohio State, but was a veteran quarterback. Yeah. So the recipe certainly seems to be there. Moving on to Duke, I think a lot of people were surprised by Manny Diaz year 1, and this is really something that, I mean, that they lose. They have some issues on offense, and actually they upgrade by getting Darian Mensah to come over from Tulane. The defense, I don't think people know how good the secondary is with Chandler Rivers and Terry Moore. Those guys are not only all ACC guys, but all America types. Wesley Williams is good on the edge. Duke just needs to find, I think, a consistent running game, which was a little bit of their problem last year. It was in fits and starts. They had some injuries. The offensive line, anchored by Brian Parker, is really good. I don't know if they're necessarily going to win 9 again, but I think Duke has shown that this type of hard-nosed mentality, that they're here to stay at least for an upper half ACC finish as long as Manny's around.
Yeah, you mentioned the secondary. PFF has them, I think, as the number 8 ranked secondary in the country. So they are very solid. Like you mentioned, Darian Mensah coming over. I mean, they won 9 games with Malik Murphy. And I'm not, don't want to disparage Malik Murphy, but Darian Mensah is better than Malik Murphy. That's an upgrade at quarterback. They still got Jacquez Moore coming back to the Rock. They got Andrell Anthony to transfer over at wide receiver from Oklahoma. So they've got the pieces, like you said, with Manny Diaz. Obviously, defense, you're going to have more faith in that, but they won a lot of 1-score games last year. Of course they lost, a heartbreaker to SMU, forcing 5 turnovers and still losing the game. But to win 9 games in your first year at Duke, after all the exodus they had from the Mike Elko era, from the players leaving and everything, I think that was a very solid start to the Manny Diaz era in Durham.
Yeah, and they do have a little bit of a tricky schedule, so they could actually be a better team but not have as many wins. I just think that Manny will probably look at it as progress, whether or not it's 7 wins, 8 wins, 9 wins, or whatever. I think he knows how to stay the course and And I think you're right. If they could win 9 with Malik Murphy, I'm really interested to see how dynamic the offense can be with Darian Mensah. Florida State, you mentioned it in your intro. Man, was that just an unmitigated disaster to go from being on the brink of the college football playoff to winning 2 games and just having all kinds of problems. I mean, DJU was not what they thought he was going to be. The defense was uncharacteristically bad. The offense turned the ball over. I think it may have just been one of those years where just everything that could possibly go wrong, it snowballed downhill. There were times they looked like they had things under control. Just some odd turnover would happen or some odd play would happen, and here comes the bad luck. He did hit the portal again this year, but I don't think it was as hard. I think he did it more with a purpose to fill in need rather than just haphazardly getting guys, oh, this guy's a talent, and they couldn't blend any of that. I think they were a little more deliberate this year. And Thomas Castellanos is a guy who's been through the ACC wars before. They have Roydell Williams back. They got Gavin Sawchuk from Oklahoma. And their receivers are going to be very interesting. People are expecting a lot from Deuce Robinson. They got Squirrel White from Tennessee. The offensive line is pretty experienced, and that's where a lot of their problems were last year. So I wouldn't be shocked if Florida State, while maybe a tick below Clemson, isn't at least back in the mix for contending for the other spot in that title game.
Yeah, I think we had them power ranked 6th in our post spring power rankings. I think the defense should be improved. Bringing over Tony White as defense coordinator from Nebraska should make some changes to that defense. And they still got talent on the defense. I mean, they got guys like Elijah Herring coming over. I mean, half their guys on the whole roster, you know, according to our lads, looking to be starters are transfers. So that's again, you said he did it more with a purpose, Mike Norvell with the transfer portal, but it's just kind of been that's the way he's building his program, which is the complete opposite of a guy like Dabo, right? One of their rivals. But it remains to be seen. I think that we had a really good year where we hit, you know, and they went 13-0, right on the brink of a playoff, and then the next year you don't hit and you go 2-10, and that's the dangers of the transfer portal in this era.
Right.
So this is kind of the rubber match, right? 2025 is the rubber match. Like what's going to work for Mike Norvell and the Seminoles? I tend to think it's probably going to be somewhere in between. I could see them going, 7-5, 8-4. I want to see how Castellanos is going to perform in that offense. Like you said, Deuce Robinson, Squirrel White, those are great weapons, but they've usually always got great weapons at the wide receiver position there at Florida State. So, again, a little bit of a tricky schedule, but you don't expect them to go 2-10 again. That's for sure.
Sure. And it will be interesting that comparison with the coaches. We're seeing coaches diving straight into the portal. Dion does it. Norvell has done it. If Dabo can win a national title with minimal, maybe it's a little bit of a sea change that coaches are going, well, Ohio State did it, but really only added 4 high-profile guys. Michigan didn't do much of it at all. And if Clemson can do it, maybe people will go, maybe we just need to dabble in this and develop our high school stuff. So it's kind of a referendum, and it'll be very interesting to see how Clemson does things and how Florida State does things and whether the results pan out. I think that's going to be a fascinating thing to watch. Moving on to Georgia Tech, Brent Key has really brought a lot of optimism to Georgia Tech. I know that the record hasn't been outstanding, although for Georgia Tech, given where they were when he took over the program, it's just a quantum leap over where they were. They've got 2 of the best players in the league on offense, Haynes King and Jamal Haynes. I call them the Haynes boys. And then they've got some receivers that Malik Rutherford is criminally underrated, I think. And then, of course, they got the transfer from FIU. And so I think this offense can really make some noise. And I just think that it's all going to hinge on the defense. If they can be a little bit better at stopping teams from scoring, I think teams were able to kind of dictate their will a little bit too often last year. If they can get some more 3-and-outs and maybe turn some teams over a little bit more, I think that will benefit the offense because this offense is not devoid of playmakers.
Yeah, they've got some opportunities in September to kind of show what they showed in 2024 and kind of, compound off that. Obviously, they open up in Boulder against Colorado, who's not going to be the same Colorado, but, it's a high profile game because Dion's there. And then their ACC opener at home in Bobby Dodd against Clemson is a real test, for them. Obviously, they showed they can do it. Last year, going to Ireland and beating that Florida State team, who was at the time number 10. We know what they turned out to be, but beating them in Ireland, and then, at the end of the season to bookend it, taking Georgia to 8 overtimes in Athens, a team who won the SEC championship. And I think just watching Haynes King play in that game and watching him play against Miami, obviously he was super banged up in that Miami game. He kept coming in and out. They kept rotating quarterbacks, and Brent Key just found a way to win the game. And that's what you love about Brent Key. Like, he's just a very underrated head coach in the ACC. And I think that if they can, take that momentum they had from the end of last year and start off the year really good. I mean, Georgia Tech's one of those teams that we're kind of on, and a lot of people are on, is like they could be a sleeper here for the ACC championship.
Yeah, when I was going through my rankings, my initial set of rankings that I had in May, I had Georgia Tech 25, and I said these guys could be in there. And then there were just a few teams when I looked at the schedules, I bumped them down to the others getting mentioned. But I would not be the least bit shocked if they end the season ranked. And I'm really pulling for Brent Key because, like you said, his attitude is just infectious. I think the players buy into it, and I think they want to win for
Yeah.
him. Moving on to Louisville. Obviously, we know what they are under Jeff Brom. They've got a really high-powered offense. They've got a new guy running it this year with Miller Moss. But when you've got weapons like Isaac Brown and Duke Watson, you're not going to stray too far from that. Those two guys are about as explosive a duo, with apologies to Notre Dame and Penn State. They are about as an explosive a duo as you find in the backfield in all of college football. So I think they will lean on them more than they lean on Miller Moss, although Miller Moss is a veteran who has played. So I don't think if big moments come that he's necessarily going to get flustered because he has seen that type of stuff before. But I think they're going to be smart with him. Brian Brom is not going to ask him to do stuff that is out of his comfort zone. And on defense, I really like Stanquan Clark and TJ Quinn. I just think that they got to figure out if they're going to be able to me anyway, if they're going to have enough guys who can rush the passer to really affect things in Louisville.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about Miller Moss. He played 9 games last year before Jaden Mayaba took over. He averaged 283 yards passing a game. And had he done that over 12 games, that would have been good for 8th in the country in passing yards. So we know what he can do under Lincoln Riley. And we believe that he can do the same thing under Jeff Brom. Jeff Brom's one of those guys who's been a coach for 11 seasons and has had 6 guys drafted in the NFL. So if Miller Moss was going to transfer anywhere with potential, this was a great place to transfer to. And obviously you mentioned the running game, best running attack in the ACC, bar none. And Colin Lacey, Chris Bell, those guys on the outside, he's going to have plenty of weapons. I think Brom is going to be able to use them really well. And yeah, to just hinge on the defense. And can the defense, take a little step forward from that last year and continue to improve?
Yeah, that's going to be again, if the defense can just make even maybe like 10, 15 spots in the national rankings, I think Louisville could be a really scary team. So it'll be interesting to see how he treats that side of the ball. You move on now to Miami. I think this is the team most people see as Clemson's biggest challenger. They brought in Carson Beck from Georgia. He's a guy with championship rings. He's got a championship pedigree. Mario Cristobal has made incremental progress. He's been recruiting lights out, but yet they still have the inexplicable losses, as you say, Georgia Tech, Syracuse, the teams that they should not be losing to, they're still losing to. And that has been a Miami bugaboo going back many years now, that they'll spring an upset here and there, but then just when you think it's safe to get behind the Hurricanes again, they lose to somebody that they should not lose to. I do think that it may be difficult to duplicate the 10 wins. I'm on board. I don't think Carson Beck is bad. He's certainly a downgrade from Cam Ward. I don't think that he is great. I think he's good, but maybe with the talent that's around him, maybe all he needs to be is good. Because that defense with Ruben Bain and Akeem Mesidor up front, that defense is going to cause problems for people. So maybe Miami won't have to be a super high scoring team to win games.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think it's a downgrade, obviously, from Cam Ward to Art Carson Beck, but Lance would tell you like 365 days ago, we would not be saying that. I mean, before last season, Carson Beck was
Right.
thought of as for sure first round pick and maybe the first quarterback taken in this past year's draft. Didn't turn out that way. His guys kept dropping the ball like crazy. Offensive line, wasn't up to, Georgia standards. I think his offensive line is going to be better at Miami, shockingly. He's going to be going against ACC defenses versus SEC defenses in the past. He'll have CJ Daniels to throw the ball to, who's transferred from Liberty to LSU and out of Miami. Mark Fletcher's back at running back. And so I think, and if you look at the defense side of the ball, like what was their big issue last year? Like they couldn't stop anybody. And
Right.
Mario went and he completely revamped the entire secondary. And all four starters projected are transfers. And so he knows he's got his guys like Ruben Bain, on the edge and everything, but they had to do something about that secondary, and they did. And so it's they've got a tough schedule too. I mean, they got to open up with Notre Dame, and then they play Florida in the non-conference. No one's going to use any ACC schools for ducking, any of these big SEC schools or big time programs. But
Right.
that's a case where like those are two tough games. If you lose those games, you drop another one in the ACC, but you still get to the championship game. Like it's win or you're out. Like that's kind of where
Right.
the trouble comes in with the ACC. Like they don't get as many mulligans as the Big Ten or the SEC would.
Sure. Yeah, they're going to be certainly fascinating to watch. I do like their offensive line with Francis Maui Noah and some of the other guys up front. And you're right with that secondary. I really like Zechariah Poyser, who came over from Jacksonville State. He's going to be a hard-hitting safety. OJ Frederic is back after a really good freshman year. But yeah, if that secondary has the same problems again, especially against some of the higher-powered offenses, then 10 wins are going to be kind of hard to come by. Moving on to North Carolina, we touched on it a little bit. The story is Bill Belichick, which is good because if you look at their roster, there's not a lot of star power on this roster. They lost their best defensive player in Amari Campbell. He transferred over to Penn State, and now they did get Gio Lopez from South Alabama to come in at quarterback, and he is a player. I don't know, though, outside of maybe Chris Culliver, who's a good return man and a solid receiver, I don't know if they have any skill position players who scare anybody. On defense, I'll be interested to see. Thaddeus Dixon is a guy I like that they added in the portal at corner. I think that he can make some plays, but I don't know what to make of this North Carolina team. I think that a lot of people are going to put a lot of stock in, okay, this one's going to take some coaching because this is not talent level what you've seen from North Carolina the last few seasons.
Yeah, I mean, there's those teams that could pop out anywhere, anytime, any season. Like we had Indiana last year, and then Arizona State and BYU were projected low in the Big 12, but they ended up, being really good. Those teams happen every year. I'm not saying this could be that type of team, but I mean, yeah, they've got the greatest coach of all time, like greatest football coach of all time. Him and Nick Saban are right up there. And if the thing with them is like, obviously, can they ignore the off-field stuff, which he's kind of said in the media that, his players he's told them to ignore it, but like, they're on social media and stuff. Like, how much can you truly ignore everything that's going on? And so this is just so un-Bill Belichick like having all like this attention and everything. And so it's really hard for me, I think really for anyone to kind of get a grasp on what this North Carolina team could be. Like we would like to focus on the players like Gio Lopez, but it's like there's so many other things going on and you just don't know where to start.
Right. And it's kind of that whole Boston mentality thing again. In New England, he was just another one of the pro sports teams. Sure, they won Super Bowls, but it wasn't a daily, okay, what are you doing in Chapel Hill, they are starved for basketball and football, and so they're going to want to digest every detail that goes on. And I don't think that scrutiny happened in New England because it was just another one of their big pro sports franchises. So how that gets handled once the season starts, that may actually be the best thing for them. We can just focus on football.
Yeah.
NC State, they came into last season with a lot of expectations, kind of fell flat. This might be the type of team Dave Doran likes, though. People aren't expecting a lot. They've got some young guys, CJ Bailey at quarterback. He was up and down, but he showed some flashes. Hollywood Smothers is a dynamic guy at running back. I really like Sean Brown on their defense. He's one of the best defensive players in the ACC. I don't think this is a complete rebuild as much as just they need to recalibrate and just get everybody on the same page. They were expecting so much with Grayson McCall, and when he got hurt early in the year, that just kind of deflated the balloon, I think. And so I think with that lessened expectation, this is the year that we won't expect North Carolina State to do anything, and they'll win 9 games.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, Dave Doran's that kind of coach. He's another guy that's underrated. And I think that, they've got the weapons. Like they've got, like you mentioned, Hollywood Smothers, CJ Bailey, 65% passer last year. Like he was really solid. Justin Jolly at tight end, Noah Rogers out at wide receiver. Like they've got the weapons. It is just a matter of sometimes you expect NC State to win 8 or 9 games. And then, like you said, last year, they just, that they took it on the chin in that game against Tennessee in the year. And you kind of saw the writing on the wall from there. Like McCall got hurt, and it was just, it seemed like they punted on the season a little bit.
Yeah. So again, so folks, be warned. Anyone taking the under on NC State this year, be warned, because this is a type of year when they flash and do something. Pittsburgh is in a little bit the same vein as North Carolina State. I know they were coming off of a 3-9 season. People thought it couldn't be that bad. And they did win 7 games, but there were some inconsistencies at quarterback. They do have some nice pieces with Kenny Johnson, with Desmond Reed. Desmond Reed, one of the most dangerous all-purpose guys in all of college football. But again, this is another team where the defense, and Narduzzi will like hearing this, the defense is going to have to carry the day. That linebacking core, Kyle Lewis and Rasheem Biles, maybe the best combo in all of college football. You don't normally see Pittsburgh up there in a unit ranking with any of their stuff, but these linebackers are the real deal. And they've got enough guys on defense. I know that their points ticked up a little bit, but I just think that was because the offense was ineffective. I think with a more effective offense this year, they can get people off the field. They can turn them over. And I think Pittsburgh is another one of those teams that's right in that area. It could be 7, it could be 9 with a break here and there.
Yeah, Narduzzi just seems like a classic, like Pittsburgh type of coach. He fits really well there. Their defense, it played well last year. I think they just picked off Kyle McCord once again in that Thursday night game. But the offense, I mean, Eli Holstein started off really, really well. I mean, if you remember last year, like Pittsburgh started off 6-0, 7-0, and people were kind of talking like, well, shoot, with their ACC schedule, like they may sneak in here, and then they went to SMU and just got absolutely pounded. But Eli Holstein started off well, took a couple nicks, got a couple injuries. That's kind of just the story of anybody's season is like your quarterback has got to stay healthy or as healthy as possible. And when Holstein is healthy, he can be a good quarterback for the Panthers. And I think running back wise, Desmond Reed is one of the most underrated running backs in the country. Like nobody really talks about him, but he put up some solid numbers last year. So I think a good quarterback, a solid running game, and a good defense is just what Narduzzi loves.
Yeah, he's going to play ball control. He's going to say, what we're going to do, just line up and you're going to need to stop us. So nothing fancy with him. And it's just kind of old school football. And that fits with the Pittsburgh mentality.
Yeah.
SMU, I think a lot of folks were curious as to how they would do in year 1 in the ACC. Well, they kind of answered that question. All they did was march on to the title game. Rhett Lashley is a guy I know that everyone talks about. Dabo, and people talk about Cristobal and some of these others, but Rhett Lashley, one of the brighter offensive minds in the game, he had the foresight to, obviously there was a little bit of injury at play, but he had the foresight to yank an established starter in Preston Stone and put Kevin Jennings in, and that changed the trajectory of SMU's season. Not a lot of coaches would do that. They might yank him for a game and then go back to it, but Jennings just created a spark, and that offense was really difficult to defend. Now they've lost some guys from that, but the offensive line is good. PJ Williams is a really, really good offensive lineman. The defense, I think, is another one. Isaiah Nokobia at safety, all-American type guy. They've got some pass rushers. I don't know if they can make the title game again, but I don't think SMU is going away either.
Yeah, they learned a lot from last year. They probably their number one takeaway, if you had to ask Brett Lashley, was like, we got to start faster. They dug themselves into a lot of holes.
They
And
did.
in the ACC championship game, they started off in a big time hole. They clawed all the way back, only to lose on that 75-yard field goal or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And then going to the playoff game, obviously playing in Penn State in December against that team wasn't going to be an easy task. But just starting off like they did, throwing those pick sixes. I mean, Drew Aller and the boys just got to sit over on the sideline and not really, have to do much that game. And you can't really blame SMU's defense, for that game, because they did a pretty good job containing the Penn State offense for the most part. But I think Kevin Jennings learned a lot last year, especially at the end of the year, playing against that tougher competition, that they've got some chances here at the beginning of the season. In that first month, again, they got Baylor and they got TCU on the schedule. So 2 solid Big 12 teams out of conference. And that's just more opportunities for them to show against quality competition. Hey, we're here to stay in the ACC.
Right, definite tone setters early in the year, and I like it. In an era when so many teams are scheduling the paycheck games, TCU and Baylor are legitimate tough games, and
Yeah.
SMU wants to prove itself. It's like, hey, we could take the easy way out and get 10 or 11 wins, but they want to prove that they're an upper echelon program, so they play these teams. So I like to see that. Stanford, maybe the most fascinating team in the league this year. Frank Reich is playing with house money. Results are immaterial. I think he just wants to, Andrew Luck as GM, wants to change the culture. I mean, Troy Taylor was okay. He was making some strides in recruiting, but obviously some behind the scenes stuff went on. It did not reflect well on the school or on him. And I think when Luck was brought in, he just said, you know what? We need to kind of do a reboot on this. Frank is a guy I know. He's a guy I trust. He's been around football forever. I don't care if we win 2 or if we win 4 or if we win 6, but we want to do it the Stanford way. And this will give Luck the chance to search all year for the right guy to put in place starting next year on the framework that Frank Reich sets down. And really, there's not a whole lot to write home about with this team. Certainly from a star potential, they and Wake Forest are probably in the back of the pack in terms of just guys who jump out at you. Had David Bailey stuck around, he would have been the one real saving grace, but he went off to Texas Tech. So they're going to go into every game outmanned, but I think they're going to just play hard. They're going to, I think, play a lot like the Harbaugh teams used to play and just dig down and see if they can play hard for 60 minutes. Maybe something goes right and they can steal a couple.
Yeah, being here in Indianapolis, I have a lot of familiarity with Frank Reich and Andrew Luck. And Frank Reich's a great coach. Andrew Luck, obviously, great quarterback. But yeah, just this really, really tough situation for them to walk into. Like you said, it's house money. So it's a 1-year deal for Frank Reich to kind of come in and see what he can do. Maybe he does. Maybe they hit big. Maybe they're one of those teams. They got a win total of 3.5. Maybe they go 6-6 or 7-5. And Luck's like, you know what? Frank might be the best man for this job. It's going to hinge on, it looks like they're going to be starting a freshman quarterback or a redshirt freshman quarterback, either Elijah Brown or Bear Bachmeyer, whose brother Tiger plays wide receiver there. So, again, it's another place similar to Cal where, there's just not a lot of people starving for football there. They'd rather, stare at their computers and make a ton of money here in 10 years and be running Google and Facebook and all that. So, but we've seen in the past when they've got players like Luck or Toby Gerhardt or Stephon Taylor, and they do show out at the farm. I don't think this year is going to be one of those years.
Yeah, it's going to take some time. But again, if they can just get some stability with the culture, then I think that some of the other stuff will fall in place
Yeah.
once Luck can get his coach in there. Um, Syracuse, they were maybe one of the big surprises of last year. I think a lot of people liked the Fran Brown hire. I mean, he certainly came from a program that knew winning with Georgia. I don't think people expected it to be quite as immediate. Kyle McCord had a great season. LaQuint Allen was a problem at the running game. Trevor Pena was an outstanding receiver. He has since moved on to Penn State. It didn't matter that the defense was kind of hit and miss. They were just a team that once the offensive momentum got going, they were a tough team to stop. I think that it's a little bit, it's a really big ask to ask them to duplicate that this year. My question is, I was looking at their schedule. The schedule ramps up this year, not just the early game with Tennessee, but they hit most of the tough stops in the ACC. So to me, this is a team that actually might have might struggle to get bowl eligibility. So, and I don't think they're a bad team. I just think there's so much turnover that it's going to be a little bit of a backstep before the long term. I think under Fran Brown looks great. He's recruiting well. I think he's getting his players into the system. I just don't see how this year can be super, super successful.
Yeah, I mean, the schedule, like you said, you start off with Tennessee, even though that's, a neutral site game in Atlanta, there's going to be a lot of Vol fans there. They're going to be
Yeah.
breaking in a new quarterback. So, could Syracuse go in and pull the upset? Yeah, we saw the same thing with, Vanderbilt and Virginia Tech last year. So, but yeah, road games at Clemson, SMU, Georgia Tech, Miami, Notre Dame, like that might be one of the toughest road slates in all of college football. We still think they're very talented team, and obviously getting Steve Angeli to transfer in, he could be a Kyle McCord type guy. Like he doesn't have Trevor Pena to throw the ball to, but he could be a guy who slings the rock. And I think Fran Brown, excellent coach. Did he? Maybe they got a little fortunate in that first year winning that many games, and kind of like
Mhm.
now the expectations are there. But we'll see what happens. I mean, I'm of the belief that I think if Fran Brown continues, this ascension that he's on, I don't think he'll be at Syracuse that long. But that's obviously a story for another podcast.
Sure, sure. Yeah, he's one who, again, that winning pedigree in Georgia, I think was just what they needed. He understands the culture. He understands what it takes to win football games, and he showed that with what they have. So
Yeah,
they will be an interesting story to watch. Virginia made a little bit of progress. I know that Charlottesville is not a hotbed of fans really getting behind their team, but Virginia has been good in the not so distant past, and I think that especially with their stadium, the way that everything is constructed, that can be a loud place when they're winning games. They won 5 last year. They flirted with bowl eligibility, and that's after 2 seasons of 3 wins. So it's small steps, but they don't seem like they recruit over the moon. They get guys who fit, but at some point you need to get guys who can make a difference. And I just don't know if they have that. I think this is a really important year for Tony Elliott, and will really determine a lot of what his future is moving forward.
yeah, he went back to the transfer portal as well, and he loves to get some old Notre Dame wide receivers. He got Jaden Thomas to come in. Obviously, they got Chandler Morris, who transferred from Oklahoma, TCU, North Texas. Like he's now at Virginia. He's going to be throwing the rock. But yeah, it's another place where like I think they're, according to Kelly Ford, they're probably the third worst team in the ACC.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, like you said, important year for Tony Elliott. I think bowl eligibility obviously is a step in the right direction. Anything below 5 wins, a 4-8 season or something, I would fear for some job security there if I was Tony Elliott.
Right. Right. And then the other in-state outpost, Brent Pry, things kind of didn't go as he expected. Some of that was because Kyron Drones was in and out of the lineup with injuries, but The offense didn't pop the way that I think they thought it would, and the defense, which has typically been a Virginia Tech staple going back to Frank Beamer, was I mean it was good. It wasn't like knock your socks off good, but it had some lapses where at crucial times in games it allowed things to happen. And I think with Drones being fully healthy this year, a lot of the onus is going to be on him because they did lose Bashal Tutin, who was a real force in the ground game. So I think a lot is going to be on Kyron Drones' plate. So if he stays healthy, I think they could make a little bit of an upward move. Can they contend for the title? Probably not, but I just think that fans want to see something that looks like progress this year with the Hokies.
Yeah, Kyron Drones, I mean, he's got all the potential in the world. He's just got to stay healthy, like you said. Their defense is going to be pretty solid again, like a typical, Virginia Tech defense. They've got two really good opportunities at the beginning of the season. Again, these ACC teams scheduling SEC opponents, and they're doing it back to back weeks, playing South Carolina at a neutral site, and then hosting Vanderbilt in that return game or revenge game if you're a Hokie. And so they get to, kind of if they somehow upset South Carolina week 1 and it's a Sunday game, 3:30, like that's a single window game. Like you're going to be in
Right.
the whole nation on Labor Day weekend playing. If Kyron Drones shows out and plays well, they beat South Carolina. Like I think sky's the limit and they can make some noise. Obviously, my buddy Lance, he's more well versed to talk about the Hokies with all of his connections there than I am. But I'm probably higher on Kyron Jones than he is, so he's a little more pessimistic on it.
Well, and we've seen it before that the other team comes in with a high profile quarterback, in this case, Lenora Sellers, and that quarterback gets outplayed by the guy that people
Yeah,
don't expect a whole lot from. So you're right. That single window game, I love. I love Labor Day weekend almost as much as I love the last weekend of the regular season. That's more for rivalries and seeing how things are going to shake out. But that opening weekend, I mean, you've got a game Sunday, you've got a game on Labor Day, you've got limited games on Saturday. So I always relish the early weeks of the season when you can actually your head isn't spinning from all of the games that are on.
yeah,
Last but certainly not least, Wake Forest. I think a lot of people were caught a little bit off guard by Dave Clawson deciding to retire. He, like Dave Doran, was a guy who often flew under the radar, but Wake Forest, it kind of started with Jim Grove. He laid the foundation, and then Clawson came in and sort of continued that. They were never super great, but they were never really bad either. They were just a good, solid team. They could upset people, upset somebody in a given year. But this to me for Jake Dickert looks like just a starting point. He's going to have to really work hard. His roster may actually be worse than his Washington State roster was last year. Certainly he had John Mateer and he had some good pieces on offense. But I mean, we've seen Robbie Ashford. We've seen Deshaun Purdy. Sure, they've shown flashes, but have they ever really shown you that they can be the guy to run an offense? So I know they're going to get away from the slow mesh, which just confounded me and confounded opponents. But to me, you've got Damon Claiborne and Tate Kearney. Just run the hell out of
yeah.
everything and maybe wear other defenses down if you can get some first downs and some drives going. Then maybe in a close game you can steal something because I do think Jake Dickert is a very good coach. They're just to me like Stanford. They don't have a lot there to lean on from a personnel standpoint.
Yeah, we put a lot of stock into the K Ford ratings, and he's got him a point and a half lower than Stanford, so they're the worst in
Yeah,
the ACC. He's got him around teams like South Alabama and
yeah.
Georgia Southern. So, like, that's the kind of talent we're talking about right now, and we're talking about an ACC team. So, yeah, you're right. I mean, a couple points better than Washington State, but I think Jake Dickert obviously is a great coach. I don't think it's his intention to do this, but if I was him, I'd be looking to just obviously, get to, 5 wins, get to 6 wins here next year. He's kind of one of those up and coming younger coaches to,
Mhm.
similar to Fran Brown, to where like, you know, show you can win with less talent and then, get that job in the future that gets you a little more talent, get you a little more recruiting ability, all that. But I don't have high hopes for a guy like Robbie Ashford at quarterback, just from what we've seen, and that's kind of where it all starts with every team. But it's gonna be tough sledding, I think, for Jake Dickert and year one of the ACC.
Yeah, I think so. They're gonna take some lumps. So we've looked at all of the teams. Now we're gonna go on to something that I call true false. I'm gonna come up with 5 questions, and I want to see if you agree or disagree with them. The first one obviously centers on Clemson. Not only are they a contender for the league title, but to me, they should be the favorite, not just the ACC favorite, but the favorite to win the national title. Is that true or is that false?
Oh man, hard hitting one right out of the gate.
Just
Gosh,
knowing the ingredients that we know about the last few national champions, I think that that at least sets the blueprint of returning quarterback stability on both lines and a veteran coach.
yeah, I'm gonna say it's false. I gotta say it's false. I get, yeah, the whole all the returning production. Of course, we saw a team like Oklahoma State have a ton of returning production last year and win 3 or 4 games. So
Mhm.
it doesn't always equal success. I think it will in this case with Clemson, but I still look around the country and I see teams like Texas, with obviously a quarterback that hasn't proven as much as Cade Klubnik, but obviously the talent's there, the coaching's there, the talent that a team like Texas has absolutely brought into Austin. A team like Ohio State, even though they're going to be replacing a lot, they just reload, right? Even Alabama, they're going to be solid. Notre Dame is going to be solid. I think um, I think if you're looking at betting odds, Clemson will be top 6 or so, top 8. And so if you do think that, I mean, that's definitely worth a play to like put a couple dollars down to see if you can win some here in a couple months. But I just think at this point right now, I think we've got Clemson, number 3 on our post spring top 12. So we're close, but we just think a couple of teams just have a little more talent than they do.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And interest of full disclosure, I have put a couple of bucks down on them as a futures bet. So I will be rooting for. I don't always root for Dabo, but when money is involved, I will root for just about
Oh yeah,
anybody. Question number 2. Both coaches in the state of Virginia will be unemployed at the end of 2025.
man, these are really good. I'm gonna say true. I'm gonna say true. Even though I just talked up Kyron Drones and Virginia Tech, I don't think they're gonna beat South Carolina. Vandy game's gonna be tough, and then
Right.
they're it stinks for a head coach that you're going to put his future employment into the health of his quarterback, staying healthy. But that's the case with Virginia Tech.
It
Uh,
is.
and I just, you haven't seen anything out of Kyron Jones that says he's going to be healthy for all 12 games. Just the way he plays and his style, I just don't know if he can do that. And Virginia Tech is a place, unlike a lot of the other ACC teams, that has tasted success nationally on a national scale. And I'm very familiar with a lot of Virginia Tech fans down there. I went to school in Lynchburg, so an hour and a half away from Blacksburg, and I'm very familiar with a lot of their fans, and they would love to think that they are a lot better than they actually are as a
Right.
program. So that tells you the expectations are high. And so, I think the expectations for, the Hokies this year from the fans is at least 8 wins to be contending for an ACC championship. And I just don't know if that's in the cards for them.
Right. I tend to agree. Third question. If Miami does not win 10 games this year and make the ACC title game, does Mario Cristobal's seat get warm?
I think he gets warm. I thought you were going to ask me if he gets, let go, but he's not going to get let go because of
No.
the recruiting momentum they built there. But it definitely gets warm. We've been on record, and not a lot of people like it, but we think he's one of those coaches that does less with more. One of the top coaches in the country at that, and that's not a good place to be. Um, he's got an experienced quarterback who should, if he's fully healthy, should be able to throw the ball for at least 3,500 yards, especially in that Shannon
Mhm.
Dawson offense.
Right.
But Yeah, it's tough to say because you lose games to, Notre Dame and Florida. Like no one's going to really fault you for those, even those are both at home. But you drop another one that you shouldn't to Syracuse or Georgia Tech, or game management stuff, time management stuff rears its ugly head again. That's the kind of stuff that I think could get Mario on the hot seat.
Definitely. Fourth question. We touched on a little bit in the Florida State segment. Mike Norvell realized his mistakes last season and will bring Florida State back to league title contention. True or false?
I'm gonna say false. I don't think they'll get quite to league title contention. They'll win some games this year, obviously more than they did last year. I think that they've got a quiet confidence about them right now. Like I think last year at this time, they were still just kind of. It seemed like they were still furious about you being
Right.
left out of the playoff, and they let it carry over into 2024. And now it's kind of like, okay, we don't want to let any part of 2024 carry over into 2025. It's a clean slate for them. And I don't think they get quite to league title contention, but I think 8 wins is a solid season for Florida State this year.
Right. And last but certainly not least, I put together my power ratings, which I released yesterday. I also did them by conference, which we are going to have in our digital magazine, which is going to be out on July 7th. We're going to break them out. And by conference, by a very slight margin, the ACC is fourth among power conferences, just behind the Big 12. My true or false is, are they closer to a really good G6 than they are to the top of the Power Four hierarchy? Top to
Uh,
bottom of the league.
yeah, I mean, I honestly, I hadn't done a lot of research on teams like Wake Forest and Stanford and Virginia, and looking at them, like those are some very subpar rosters when you're looking at P4 conferences and P4 teams. I think the SEC and Big Ten definitely think that they are, closer to G6,
Right.
but yeah, it's that's a really really good question. I hadn't really thought about it that way. I
Definitely
would
want to make you think on a weekend.
yeah, I would say they are, and if they don't get Clemson and another team in and win a game or two in the playoffs. Like, starting the first 2 years and probably the only 2 years we're going to have 12 teams in the playoffs with, a winless record.
Right.
That's going to be a tough look for the league as they're looking forward and looking how many teams should we let in this thing from each conference. And so, but yeah, they got to get some of those bottom tier teams to tick up. I think they are the fourth rated conference because you look at the bottom tier teams in the Big 12, they just look like they have more solid coaching, more solid quarterback
Yeah.
play all across the board. So I think the ACC is definitely at the bottom of the P4 pecking order right now.
Right. Moving on. Now let's kind of where the rubber meets the road. Title game participants. I think we're both in agreement that Clemson is going to be there. The second spot may be up for grabs. I was debating long and hard about three teams: Miami, SMU, and Georgia Tech. In the end, I do think that even though I have misgivings a little bit like you do about Mario Cristobal, I do think having a veteran at quarterback and having a talent advantage over the other two teams is going to be enough to get Miami into the ACC championship game, where it will lose to Clemson.
I really like Louisville this year. But their conference schedule difficulty is
Yeah,
second. They play, they got to go to Pitt, to Miami, to Virginia Tech, to SMU. They get Clemson at home. So
on a Friday night.
yeah, it's a tough slate. Um, but I think I might go a rematch of last year, and I think SMU will get it done. They don't have as easy of a schedule as they had last year, but I think they've got they got to go to Clemson, which is like, you'd almost rather play that game on the road because,
Right.
having Clemson come in and beat you at home, there's one of your home games that, you can chalk up as a loss. You go on the road, you're like, okay, you're not expecting a loss, but you lose on the road to Clemson. Okay. You kind of hold serve at home. You get Miami the first weekend in November. Could be cold there in Dallas. Louisville's at the end of the season, the week before Thanksgiving. Again, could be a cold there in Dallas. So I think SMU with Kevin Jennings, with the experience they got last year, I think they have the material to get back to face Clemson in the championship game.
Yeah, that would not be any kind of surprise, especially since I've already gone on how effusive I am about Rhett
Yep.
Lashley and his coaching acumen. All right, college football playoff berths. We, like you said, probably the last year of 12. Um, I was looking at stuff. I am hard pressed to see. I actually think it will benefit the ACC if it goes to any of these mandated models where they
Yeah.
get a minimum number of spots, because I have Clemson in my top 5. My next ACC team in the rankings is Miami at 19. So I do not have another ACC team in the top 12. I could easily see this league only getting one.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think it's whoever wins. Now, again, SMU, Miami, they beat Clemson, again,
Sure.
undefeated Clemson. That could happen, but I think if we're projecting out what we think is going to happen, we think Clemson is going to win that ACC championship game against whoever they play. If that happens, yeah, I think they're a one bid league, and I think after, again, especially after watching what we watched last year in the playoff, I think that'll be in people's minds where Clemson played well against Texas, but couldn't get it done. SMU just got kicked off the field in Happy Valley. Arizona State with the Big 12 pushed Texas to the brink.
Yep, they
And
did.
very well could have won that game. So I think people kind of see that like, okay, maybe the Big 12 wasn't, as bad as everyone thought. And like, maybe we should have given Iowa State, maybe we should have given BYU a look last year. So I think maybe this year is like, it's a flip flop. Maybe Big 12 gets a couple teams in, the ACC only gets one.
Right. It'll be very interesting to watch if Miami can break through, if SMU can kind of repeat, if Georgia Tech or Louisville are kind of the new kid on the block and can maybe sneak in with one of those last at-large berths. I think that while the Big 12 is a lot more wide open and promises a lot more fun, I think the fact that we kind of have almost a foregone conclusion Clemson's going to win makes it a little less interesting, but I think the subplots just below the surface are going to make this still a fun league to watch.
Yep.
Thanks a lot for breaking this down with me, Tyler. I had a lot of fun. I think we hit every team and a lot of the subplots. If folks want to find you and Lance, where is it that they can do that?
Yep. Always Talking Ball, college football podcast. On social media, we are on X at Always Talk Ball. We're on Instagram, TikTok. Lance does a phenomenal job putting out clips and stuff. He puts on all social medias, puts those together. YouTube channel is growing really, really big right now. We're closing in on 1,000 subscribers, so appreciate everybody out there. Follow us on YouTube, and then audio. We're on Spotify and Apple as well. So wherever you get your podcasts, we're there. Always Talking Ball, and that's pretty much all we do. We just talk ball all the time.
And that is a good thing. And pretty soon we will actually have ball to talk about rather than just coming up with ideas for shows. We'll be able to talk about the actual games. Good catching up. Hopefully we can get both of you guys during the season at some point to chop things up. Hope you have a great rest of the weekend, and the season cannot get here soon enough. We will be in touch soon.
Appreciate it, Mike. Thanks for having me on.